The recent murders of 3 transgender women in Louisiana are not linked, but their deaths are part of a disturbing trend.
New details tonight in the July murder of a transgender woman. We have learned that 22-year-old Tracy Single was stabbed to death outside of a West Houston gas station.
Hello, my name is Ryan Luft, and we are about to go on an adventure through the transgender community. Before I go and tell other people's stories, I feel it's best that we begin with mine. I don't feel it was a surprise to anyone when I came out. I feel it was more of a surprise of how long it took for me to actually come out, because I didn't actually come out until my senior year of high school. Before I came out, I was scared of showing who I really was. And the craziest part about my coming out story is I only chose to come out to my family. To everyone at school and my friends group, I was actually outed by my partner at the time. The day I decided to start taking hormones completely changed my life, and the day I started actually taking them changed my life even more. February 17th, 2017. That's a day I'll always remember.
I guess this is my boy's month and a half on T, so let's see what happens.
Now that you know a little bit of my story, let's dive right into this.
My name is Taylor Larson, and I identify as a trans man. Well, I was born in a female body, but I identify as a male, and I am in the process of changing my outer to fit my inner.
My name is Ellie, and I identify as gender nonconforming. Being gender nonconforming pretty much implies that if you take any basic gender or gender role to adhere to, I would reject that and try to remain labelless.
So, my name is Theo, and I identify as non-binary. My gender identity to me means that I don't identify as like a woman or a man, and that is very subjective depending on who you ask, because different people will have different answers, but quite simply I just don't associate with stereotypical gender norms.
I came out in July of 2017.
Today was my first shot of testosterone, and this is what I sound like.
Today I am 1 year on testosterone, and this is what my voice sounds like.
Today I am 2 years on testosterone, and this is what my voice sounds like.
Well, when I was younger, I knew that I was uncomfortable with who I am. I wasn't really sure what that meant, and not being comfortable with who I am kept me kind of closed off from the world. So I really didn't know what being transgender meant until I was in high school. And once I was introduced to the term, I looked into it, and the more I read, the more I realized, this is me, this is who I am. And now I know what it means and why I've been so uncomfortable. And so for a few years I didn't come out to my family. I was scared. So I identified as a lesbian female, and I dressed as masculine as I could. And then when I hit 21, I decided, this is my life, so I'm going to start living it how I want to where I can be comfortable with myself.
Well, you come out every day, but probably for the first time, 8th grade. I always knew that I did not identify as a girl or like woman, but at the same time didn't really identify as being a man. And I got my hair cut super short in 4th grade and regularly got identified by other people as male, but that didn't, feel right at the time. So as opposed to feeling out a lot of different identities, instead I really never adhered to any label and started to tell people in 8th grade that I didn't want to be identified with anything specific, and then I found non-conforming and felt as though that would be a good identity to give people, because they always end up pushing for more and more description.
Well, I first came out at the end of sophomore year in high school when I was around 15. But I think as a trans person, you constantly have to come out a little bit every day, depending on where you are and who you're with. My story, particularly pertaining to gender, is, I would say, pretty average for most people in my generation. I grew up forced with feminine gender roles and gender norms, trying to present as feminine as possible, wearing makeup and skirts and dresses, and I never enjoyed that. I think my mom has a few pictures of me as a 2-year-old in a pink dress screaming. And throughout school it was always a little difficult because I never quite affiliated with like the girls in my class, and after a certain age the boys in my class didn't want to play with me anymore. So I was left to figure out like, well, where do I fit in? Who do I fit in with? And once I was going through puberty and things were developing, I started to realize that I didn't associate with the same things that some of the other people in my grade were. And I started to do some research on the internet about gender and different identities and transitioning and trans people. And then I realized, like, I questioned myself if I was a trans man and I felt like a man, and I realized that was not the answer for me. I didn't feel like a man. So I did some more research, and then I went to a youth group and I met a bunch of people with varying aspects of gender identity and gender expression, and that really opened my eyes. And I learned about non-binary and how personal that could be, and I just clicked with that. Transitioning from a different country, I think, poses a few different obstacles as just like transitioning in your home country, because I was originally born in Europe, in France, but my passport is German. And so I had to do my legal gender name change and name change over there, which I didn't learn German as a child, so I had to learn German prior to doing that, which was an obstacle as on its own. And it's just a very different legal system. So it's a lot more expensive, it takes a lot more time. It took me about 2.5 years to finally get my name and gender marker changed. And it's in Germany, it's specifically interesting because you're not allowed to change your name to something that's traditionally masculine without changing your gender marker. So I wasn't allowed, even if I wanted to keep my female gender marker, which personally I did, I wasn't allowed to. And I had to see multiple psychiatrists before doing that, and all in German, which added some more obstacles, but that recently ended, and I'm now like officially in my passport and everything, Theodore, and then it makes it, with Homeland Security and immigration, a little easier as well. It's less confusing upon impact.
So, have you faced any struggles since coming out?
A few, yeah. I have some family members, my grandma mostly, who isn't really accepting of it, so she will never call me by the right pronouns. And I've had an encounter with one of my younger brother's friends who has probably been the worst person or the person to say the worst thing to me so far. But other than that, other than getting misgendered in the community I'm from, it's probably my biggest struggle.
And what community are you?
A very small, it's really church-related county in Missouri.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, I'm a South Florida boy, so I don't really deal with much of that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, we got a lot of it.
yeah, I bet.
Well, I still use the women's restroom, so sometimes people are a little bit abrasive, just trying to go to the bathroom and mind my business. Medical visits can at times be uncomfortable because people assume things even though they have my chart and see that I am still female. They assume a lot of things. That's about it though.
Since coming out, I've faced very different struggles at very different points in my transition. When I first started to transition, I think the very first struggle is the inner struggle of acceptance. It took me a long time to accept myself and what not identifying with a traditional gender identity meant to me. And then as I started to outwardly transition a little bit more with my expression and my mannerisms changed a little bit, there started to be some more conflict and struggle with other people. I used to use the women's restroom, and I found that like I personally can no longer use the women's restroom because I've been harassed a lot trying to use them. I've had women grab me by the wrist and kick me out of bathrooms. I've had women yell at me to get out of the bathroom. When I was in high school, a group of girls tried to beat me up in the bathroom. So once I started medically transitioning, it became a lot easier for me to go to the men's room and just avoid conflict because everybody looks down, and that's ideal in that scenario. But afterwards, I would say I was very, very blessed family-wise, where everybody accepted me. without hesitation. They asked questions when they were confused, but everybody tried to be as accommodating as possible, which was wonderful.
How does it make you feel that, like, as a transgender person, like, if you get injured or something worse than that, like, how does it make you feel that we're unprotected, like, by the government?
It makes me terrified, honestly, because, you know, especially where I'm from, you go into somewhere small and, you know, you write on your papers and your ID says male, but they see you and your body and they judge and they say things. You never know what could happen.
It's mildly concerning that the government doesn't care as much about my specific demographic, but at the same time, assault is assault, so if it were to happen just because of my identity, I don't see it as being imperative that somebody be jailed for a longer amount of time because of that.
It makes me very sad that people in government don't care about the violence rates in the trans community, especially with my European background, where it's been forbidden for decades now. But at the same time, I also feel as though you shouldn't be held to a higher standard just because your reason for assault was targeted. I think assault is assault and should be persecuted regardless with the same amount of vigilance.
Do you feel there's a lot of hate in the trans community, like, from the outside and within?
I feel there's some within with things that I've seen, but I feel like there's definitely a lot from the outside. Because the people are made to believe that you're born this, so you're that, you're exactly what you're born not. And that is just a mental illness, or that it's part of your imagination. And they don't agree with it, and so they bash you for it.
I do believe that there is specific hatred against the trans community, and whether it be because of religious or just bigoted reasons, not enough is being done within the community to focus on that rather than focusing on the problems inside the community and trying to segment different identities of being trans as separate as opposed to just as one united umbrella term.
I do think there is a lot of hate towards the trans community throughout the globe. I think it's sad, but I also don't think that you can be upset with an individual who grew up their entire life hearing a certain way about a certain group of people and not knowing otherwise. I think the only thing we can do is try to put as much positive images out there to show that trans people are people too, and educating that being trans doesn't make you not a person. And I think it's regardless of why you might have those beliefs, environmental factors should not be the thing to persecute somebody for. It's their willingness to be open-minded.
Have you ever felt unsafe being openly trans?
Not yet. I haven't.
Yeah, I've felt unsafe being openly trans, but no more than I felt safe being openly queer. I think they coincide a lot in a lot of places where I might feel threatened, like gendered areas or in certain cities.
Personally, no. I have been extremely fortunate to grow up in South Florida, which the majority of the people who live here are indifferent at best, or accommodating. So, and then my outside experiences have been in Europe, where nobody really cares over there, in my experience where I've been. So I know that there are areas that are very unsafe to be openly trans, but I've been fortunate enough to not be in many of those environments.
What advice would you give to trans people who are a little less far in their transition?
Don't be afraid to be who you are, and don't let the people around you who are a lot less open-minded get you down.
For people who aren't as far in their transition, I would say it's important to be okay with yourself before you do anything drastic to yourself. I think regardless of gender, you need to be okay with yourself before you do anything drastic. It's really, really, really important to make sure that you're in a solid, supportive environment, to not have people who are pushing unhealthy ideas on you or policing your behavior or your questions. Educate yourself as much as possible, and above all, accept yourself.
What does it mean to be trans to you? Like, what does it personally mean to you?
It's definitely made me stronger mentally, knowing what it means to be who I am.
To me, being trans means that I don't identify as cis because I don't really identify as anything. I resonate with my birth sex, which is female, but I have really no more label beyond that.
To me, being trans just means that I don't adhere to traditional societal norms of gender expression.
How can allies help the trans?
I mean, allies get pretty good support. You know, support's a big thing. Seems how some of us really don't get any. You know, I was one of the lucky ones who did get support from family and friends, but having allies to help support us and stand up for us and try and educate other people.
I think making themselves aware that they are allowed to have opinions, even if they're not trans, would make allies a lot more effective at creating change. Because if you can also recognize as an ally and as somebody who's not in a community that there are things you can do and there are stances that you can take, then you can affect a lot more change, because people will agree with your idea, not just other people's.
I think allies are vital to the trans community. We wouldn't be anywhere without allies. They are the majority of the people out there, and if we ever want anything to get better, everybody needs to pitch in, regardless of the issue. I really do think that this is an issue that affects everybody in a big or small way, because everything affects everyone regardless of if you're aware of it or not, and the only way forward is together.
How do you think the trans community can help itself?
You know, we have some trans people who are like rude and mean to other trans about how they identify and how they go about their transition. But then it just confuses, you know, people who don't understand, and we have enough struggles and of being who we are. We shouldn't tell each other who we should be.
The trans community can help itself by not picking battles inside of itself. Like, unite, find things that make you different, but you don't have to draw lines with anybody else just because of that.
I think the trans community can help itself in a few ways. The first way, I think, is to make sure that we are educating those who aren't aware. If somebody is asking you a question about your transition or your gender, I think it's really important to be open-minded and receptive that you might be the very first person that they've ever encountered in their entire life to be going through this. And they might genuinely just want to know what that's like. And I think education is so vital in helping everybody understand each other. So just be open to talking about it. Another way, I think, is to put a positive image out there. Don't do bad things and post it all over the internet and give somebody the wrong idea. I also don't think that you should do things that are bad and post it on the internet. That's just like a general rule for everybody. But that will change somebody's perspective or perception of the entire community if they aren't personally affected by it. So it's really all about, in the end, education, actually.
What misconceptions or stereotypes do you want to dispel? Like,
people's opinions on us in the bathroom, or that it's just a phase, so that going to therapy is going to get you out of it. But my main one is probably the bathrooms. Some people think that we're in there for younger children, or, you know, my cousin personally asked me to continue to use the women's restroom until I couldn't anymore, because, like, as a mother. And at first I really didn't know what she meant, and I know she didn't mean any harm by it at that time, but we're not there to, you know, look at your kids or anything like that.
I think my least favorite stereotype about trans people is that they are afraid of recognition of their past, or having not identified as what they are now for such a long time. Like, I'm very at peace with who I was and who I am, and the fact that I keep changing, so I think if people walk on eggshells around me, that's a little bit uncomfortable.
I would really love it if people stopped thinking that being trans was one thing. Being trans is so many things to so many different people, and it's so subjective that there is no be-all, end-all solution or answer to what it is to be trans.
do you feel the fight we're constantly fighting with society will ever be over?
I think maybe later on down the road it'll ease up some, but I don't think we'll ever get away from the certain people that just refuse to open their minds.
I think it's up to trans people and their allies to be more effective in making change and pushing people to apply to public government and federal government and really make effective legislature to create change, and then after long enough that will trickle down into society. So yeah, probably. I think it's definitely possible.
I think the fight will always be evolving, because I think there will always be something to progress on. The world is always evolving, we are always learning, everything is always changing. So I think the fight will change, and part of me is a little sad because I know that that's just human nature. We tend to be a bit destructive. But on the other hand, it makes me really happy because it gives me hope that people will always want what's best for everyone. I think the most important thing for everybody, regardless of age, race, social class, ethnicity, religion, gender identity, sexuality, is to be open to other people's ways of life.